So a little while back, I released a video on the new 2021 Ford Bronco. Check it out if you haven't, link in description. And essentially, Ford brought back a retro classic in the Bronco and redesigned it for the 2021 model year. It was a huge success, everyone loved it, particularly because Ford implemented a fresh, clean new redesign with modern technology and formidable off-roading capabilities, while so importantly staying true to what the original Bronco was. If you're gonna call something Bronco, it needs to be a Bronco, and Ford did just that. In fact, many other companies, like Land Rover with their newly designed Defender, have also had great success bringing back older SUV models for a brand new, fresh, modern redesign that stays true to the roots of the original. So quite clearly, a lot of manufacturers have been trying to profit off the growing market interest that is shifting towards nostalgic retro SUVs. However, Jeep have not been so successful with the new release of the redesigned Jeep Grand Wagoneer. Okay, so the original Grand Wagoneer was a 4x4 SUV, almost station wagon type body style. It was in production from 1963 ending in 1991, and people used to love this thing, and they still do. The nostalgia that comes from the Wagoneer is immense, with its beautiful side wood panels and visions of long family road trips through the countryside. That fact aside, Jeep have redesigned the Grand Wagoneer, and the reception has been anything but welcome.
What the fuck?
Now, in theory, this was a clever play for Jeep. After seeing how much success Ford had with their new Bronco, they decided to unveil this new Grand Wagoneer to try to steal some of Ford's thunder and distract people from the Bronco. Now, this would have been a perfect play in practice if they actually designed a good Wagoneer. But before we get into that, let's talk about what you get with the newly announced Jeep Grand Wagoneer, because actually it's quite impressive. So there are actually two models of the Wagoneer, one being the base Wagoneer, which starts around $60,000 US and will compete with the likes of the Chevy Tahoe and Toyota Sequoia. And then we have the one that was officially unveiled, that being the Grand Wagoneer, which starts at around $75,000 US, but can get as high as $100,000. It will compete with the more opulent luxury brand models in that full-size SUV segment like the Cadillac Escalade, Lincoln Navigator, Mercedes GLS, and BMW X7. In terms of what's powering the vehicle, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer will actually have a plug-in hybrid powertrain, a small surprise but honestly a very welcome one considering the gradual but undeniable transition towards hybrids and fully electric powertrains in recent time. I think it's a good move. The body frame will come from the Ram 1500 and will share the same engine and transmission with the Ram as well, which means that the Grand Wagoneer will have a 3.6-liter V6 with a hybrid system called e-Torque, which uses an electric motor in addition to the gas-powered one as the base engine. However, you can also go for the more powerful and larger 5.7-liter V8, which also has the e-Torque hybrid technology as well. Now, the performance numbers for the engine aren't known as of yet, but all-wheel drive is standard, and the Grand Wagoneer will come with an air suspension system. Moving on inside, I have to admit, this is a beautiful interior. It's truly luxurious, great materials, and a very high-tech futuristic look in there. It's very nice. Naturally, it's 3-row seating, 7-passenger capacity, a sizably large cargo area, so great practicality with this vehicle, and a common motif in this SUV are screens, and lots of them. You have 7 different screens in the entire vehicle. Yes, 7. Firstly, you have a fully digital 12.3-inch gauge cluster screen in front of the steering wheel. You have 2 center infotainment screens, a 12-inch on top and a 10-inch on bottom. And this is where it gets crazy. You have a 10-inch passenger side display, which I've never seen in a car like this. This presumably just has more control features so the passenger won't have to use the center screens. Now, that's only 4 of the 7 screens. In the second row seat, you have a center-mounted 10-inch screen for rear seat controls. And lastly, you have 2 more 10-inch screens on either front seat. So in essence, if you want to brag about having 10 inches, this is the car to get. So in all honesty, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer is quite impressive, particularly when you consider the $75,000 US price point. So why has the new redesigned Grand Wagoneer received so much hate? Well, simply put, it's not Grand Wagoneer enough. Look at the old one, and then look at the new one. They are worlds apart. Now look at the old Ford Bronco and then the new one. It's a clear difference, but the proportions and general concept are distinctively similar, and you can see how the roots of the old one have been successfully carried over to the new one. And that's the problem, you don't see that similarity with the new Grand Wagoneer compared to the old one. It's almost as if the designers tried to sever all ties with the old one to make another carbon copy of essentially every other luxury SUV out there, while using the Grand Wagoneer brand name to hopefully attract loyal buyers who have extremely fond and nostalgic memories of the old Grand Wagoneer. We talk about those memories, those family countryside road trips, and what originally was the grand standard of luxury 4x4s in its day. Unlike the Bronco, Jeep haven't stood true to what the original vehicle was all about. In no unveiling so far has there ever been a redesigned Grand Wagoneer with a side wood body panel, which was a massive staple for the original vehicle and a huge reason as to why it was so remembered. There are no brown or earthy colors that Jeep enthusiasts have really demanded. Jeep have entirely missed the mark with the new Grand Wagoneer and haven't been able to capitalize off of doing a retro-themed redesign that everyone wanted and everyone was so excited for in competition like the Ford Bronco and the new Land Rover Defender. As for the new Grand Wagoneer's success, it looks quite uncertain. Admittedly, this is a very luxurious, capable, and nice-looking full-size SUV with a lot of great features, tech, and a very impressive hybrid powertrain that will definitely make the car more efficient. However, this is Jeep, known for making the Wrangler. They've made their name synonymous with rugged and rustic off-roaders, and to then go and create a full-size luxury SUV entering a completely different market segment, which is entirely dissimilar to the rest of their vehicles in the lineup, it's quite a risk. I understand many rich people have Wranglers or want Wranglers, but it's mainly because of the muscular off-roader military look that it gives you. The new Grand Wagoneer isn't that muscular off-roader, and it ultimately isn't a Wrangler. The Jeep brand name isn't synonymous with luxury or a higher standard of vehicles, so trying to appeal to the demographic who are used to Range Rovers and Escalades and Navigators and G-Wagons and GLCs, it is definitely very established competition, and Jeep have too much ground to make up. And that brings me to my final point, and that is the Grand Wagoneer name. Jeep have failed to acknowledge the weight and the following that the name has. If Jeep released this SUV and called it something completely different from Grand Wagoneer, no one would have a problem. This is quite clearly a nice-looking, luxurious, and impressive full-size SUV that could potentially compete with the Mercedes, BMW, and Range Rover if marketed properly. However, they called it the Grand Wagoneer, and in doing so, that comes with a responsibility that needs to be fulfilled. The name that is given to this vehicle is so important because with that name, Grand Wagoneer, comes a myriad of expectation, deep-rooted history, and emotional connection. With a name comes character, personality, and ultimately an identity. When I say Corvette, you think of a thrilling sports car. When I say Wrangler, you think of a rugged off-roader. When I say Grand Caravan, you think of Karen picking up her kids from soccer practice. The point is, the name has monumental significance because Jeep chose to call it a Grand Wagoneer, but they implemented nothing that is reminiscent of a Grand Wagoneer. The Grand Wagoneer's identity has been lost, and that's why people are so disappointed. So the question remains, how many pace points does the new Grand Wagoneer get? Well, it gets an astoundingly disappointing 60 out of 100, ironically very small PP despite having 10 inches everywhere in the interior.
Boo! You stink!
Is it a good luxury full-size SUV? Yes, it is. Is it worth the money? To a certain extent, yes, it is. Is it a good Grand Wagoneer? No way in hell, and that's the real drawback of this car. Making an expensive luxury SUV was the focal point, and making a good Grand Wagoneer was a clear afterthought. This could have been a wonderful SUV that might have hopefully been the beginning of great success in a new market segment for Jeep, as long as it wasn't named Grand Wagoneer.
No! My name's not
Grand Wagoneer.